Welcome to Canvas New Quizzes. In this portion, we'll be discussing how to build your quiz. Once you have determined all of the settings for your quiz, you can then begin to add questions. To add questions to your quiz, select the blue plus icon on the screen. Here you can see all of the question types that are available in Canvas New Quizzes. While many are familiar, such as multiple choice, multiple answer, fill in the blank, true or false, etc., some are new. For example, a stimulus question allows you to provide students with a piece of material they need to reference as they answer questions. This is great for providing students a reading passage or a formula sheet to use to answer questions. If I wanted to provide students the stimulus of the raven, I could provide them the title of the stimulus, any instructions that I wanted them to know while they use that particular passage, and I can actually paste the content of the poem directly into the stimulus area. This means that any questions I attach to this stimulus will provide students with the ability to see the passage while they answer. I have the option of displaying the questions to the right or below the stimulus, and to provide myself or another faculty member the source URL from where I obtained the content, in this case, the Poetry Foundation. I also have the ability to add the stimulus to an item bank for use later by choosing Add to Bank and creating a new item bank. I can now attach any number of questions to this stimulus by choosing Attach Question. Again, I'm provided the same options of question types as I was a few minutes ago. Categorization questions allows students to move different ideas, sentences, etc., to buckets. For example, what happened during the story or what did not, words that make sense with this passage, etc. Essays are the same as short answer and provide students a text box to be able to respond. If you are going to bank your questions, it may be helpful to give them a title. For example, if I was going to have a question on the theme, I might title it something like Raven Theme Essay. With essay questions, you are given a few options as to what you would like to provide to students. Obviously, we don't need a calculator for this type of question, but if you're asking students to explain their logic in a math class, an engineering class, or a science class, that may be helpful. The rich content editor is the items you see above here, allowing students to make format changes as far as bold or underlining their text, centering it, etc. Especially if you are going to ask students to cite sources, the rich content editor is a handy tool for students. Spell check is an obvious option, as is the show word count. We do recommend that if you're going to give students a specific word count or word count range, that you do provide them that show word count just to help them along. You can also set word limits, as in a minimum and or maximum number of words that you will accept. Grading notes are not available to students. These are for you as the instructor, maybe specific things that you're looking for, or if you're using Grader or you have someone assisting you, any kind of information as to what you're looking to read in student responses could go in the grading notes. If you're using student outcomes, you have the option of aligning your questions with specific outcomes. And again, I have the option to bank my item. Now, obviously, I would want this question to stay in the same bank as this stimulus. So when I choose Add to Bank, I would leave it on Existing Item Bank, and I would find the bank I've just created and add to it. I do have the option, if I need to edit the question using the pencil, to edit it here. Please note that things like point values can be changed without editing in the bank, but to change the actual question, you will need to choose Edit in Bank. If I just wanted to change the point value to make this 10 points, I could do so without editing the question in the bank. If I wanted to add comments and feedback, that would require me to edit in the bank. Let's look at how that looks. By choosing the chat bubbles icon, I have the ability to provide students with feedback for a correct answer, for an incorrect answer, or general feedback regardless of what they choose. You can choose to put information in any or all of these boxes at your discretion and based on the specific assessment. Once I'm done and I've made the changes necessary to my question, I can choose Done, and I can see that the question has been edited in my item bank. I can attach multiple questions to the same stimulus by choosing Attach Question again, choosing a different type of question or another of the same, and again, giving it some sort of title and the actual question. Much like other multiple choice questions, I have the ability to set any number of answers by simply typing them in. I can add additional answer choices by choosing plus answer. Obviously, all of the above is not the correct answer here, but let's talk about a handy feature. Note that I have an option down below to shuffle my answer choices. Once I choose that, I'm given a lock icon here for each of my answers. If you're using something like all of the above, none of the above, A and B above, etc., you can choose to lock specific answer choices in their position. Obviously, we would want something like all of the above or none of the above to be the last choice, so I can lock that answer in the last position. You can lock as many or as few of the answer choices that you want. You can also leave specific feedback based on a specific answer choice. For example, if a student chose happiness, I could leave them feedback and choose Done. Perhaps you refer them back to specific videos or content using the rich content editor tools. I do also have the option to vary points by answer. For example, in a math class, if a student has mastered all of the topics but made a simple mistake and forgot to simplify a fraction, perhaps you could give them slightly less points for an option that has an unsimplified fraction. By choosing vary points by answer, I can then decide that loss is the 10-point correct answer. I can see that it's automatically updated my score, but I might agree to give 5 points if someone said sadness or 3 points if someone said anger. Again, if you're using outcomes, you have the option to align it with a specific outcome in your course. And again, I can add that question to my bank. Because I added that essay question a few moments ago, the existing item bank is automatically selected and my most recently used bank is listed. I just need to click Add. One other important question type is the multiple answer. The select all that apply type question, which does have a few unique characteristics you need to be aware of. Again, I would give myself a title for my question so that I know what it'll look like in my bank and the question stem itself. I provide students answer choices. Again, I have the option to shuffle my choices and again to lock answers into a specific position, such as none of the above. But an important thing to note here is below for the grading options. If I set this to partial credit with penalty, let's say this question is 10 points. There are 2 choices. Each choice here is worth 5 points for the 10-point total of the question. If a student were to choose only sadness, they would receive 5 points. If a student were to choose only loss, again, they would receive 5 points. However, if a student were to pick sadness and none of the above, or loss and happiness, for example, one correct and one incorrect, it does get a little tricky. By choosing one of the correct answers, for example, loss, the student would receive 5 points. However, for choosing an incorrect choice, they would lose 5 points. This would result in a net 0 for the question. You do have the option of requiring an exact match. This would require both sadness and loss to be selected for students to get any credit. This is a personal decision. You do have the option as you grade the assessments to add the points back if a student got one of the choices correct, or you have the option of giving them points if they lost them for choosing something incorrect. Only you can make that decision. Again, I have the option to align with outcomes or to add it to my item bank. Again, it will automatically default to my specific bank that I've used recently. Once I'm done adding these questions to my stimulus, I can use the blue plus button at the bottom or the top of the screen to add more questions that are not tied to the stimulus. Again, to attach more questions to the stimulus, I would use attach question. For new questions, I would want the plus button. And I'm again presented with the same options. Few things to note. For categorization questions, students are given the ability to sort those materials into the 2 categories. You can have items that do not go into either category. You can have more than 2 categories. Do keep in mind that it can get unwieldy past 3 or 4. I also have the ability to add separate essay questions, file uploads, fill in the blanks, and many more. Please note that hotspot questions are not allowed at this time as they are not compliant with 508 federal laws. For ordering questions, one important bit of information is it's important to provide students a top and bottom label for when you want them to put the items in order. Again, you can add multiple answers. You can display the answer choices in a paragraph. I can still add it to a different bank or the same if I choose, and I can set the point value. Other handy tools that we have with Canvas New Quizzes is the ability to duplicate a question, which just makes a copy. You can also reorder the questions using the 8-pack icon to the right and reorder the questions. This works within stimulus questions as well. One important note is that if the number of points in your questions does not match the number of points you put on the assignment details screen, Canvas will scale those points for you. Once you are done and have built all of your questions, use the return button to go back to your quizzes menu. Thank you for watching. For more information, please visit clt.odu.edu.